Spain off a couple of screens. Esquivel to Garcia. Off the deflection. Los Fresnos comes back and wins.
Now Santa Maria will put up a three. Bang! Santa Maria!
With Warner, here comes a head of the jam. Counted for two. Field. Adios! And the Falcons win on a walk-off. And it's saved. What a game.
Smack to the left. That is gone.
Rob for Perez. That's my play. Off the backboard, counting, and a win. And a win. Ryan Perez wins the game for the Santa Rosa Warriors, and they go nuts. And why not?
Welcome one and all once again to here. We're back from, to Luke Fruia Motors again on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. I say a beautiful Wednesday afternoon, but outside it's a little stormy and rainy. Doing all right. And of course, yeah, again, we're back at Luke Fruia. It's always a good time here. Like I mentioned, it's a little rainy outside is what I was trying to say here. It's been a little rainy. 74 degrees Fahrenheit here in Brownsville, Texas. It's stormy, of course, rainy through, really 3 p.m. It's supposed to clear up at around 4. So anyways, rain seems to still be coming down outside a little bit like that, but it's not too bad. It's not, nothing too bad in general. But always, of course, a good time here. If you're in the market for a new car, well, come check out Luke Fruia Motors, Buick GMC, and Cadillac in Brownsville, Texas, off of Price Road, Old Alice Road. Very exciting once again. We got a lot in store for you all to talk about. A little bit of high school basketball. We'll talk about, of course, how all the high school football teams ended their seasons. From MMA winning a championship, a state title to be exact, to the rest of the teams being eliminated in the second round of the playoffs, all the way to even St. Joseph Academy, which is pretty interesting to say the least. They played against a very difficult Houston team. That was going to be a tough win in general, but unfortunately they could not get the job done this season, which, well, guess what? They'll get to focus on a little bit of basketball and then, of course, a lot of soccer there at St. Joseph Academy. And of course, you move on to how did Los Fresnos do in their game, how did McAllen Memorial do in their game, how did Edinburgh High do in their game, how did Wesco High do in their game. Of course, all the teams that were still in play. And then, of course, yes, we are talking a little bit about some, of course, high school basketball. Really what I want to get to today is a little more on the college-heavy side of things for football and even basketball, because, yes, it is Feast Week. It's the day before, of course, Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone who, of course, from the U.S. who celebrates it, of course, comes together for that holiday in general. And, of course, hopefully you all are having, if you're off of school already this week, teacher, whoever, hope you're enjoying this holiday week as well. It's always a fun time. It's a great time. It always reminds me, of course, coming home as I was a student, of course, coming home on that Friday and then getting that whole week off and getting to sit around the TV and getting to watch college basketball a week, as they call it, of course, the Feast Week on ESPN, from, of course, the Battle of Atlantis tournament to the Maui tournament to, all of those sorts of tournaments. The, of course, tournament up in New York, which they would call it the NIT Invitational Tournament, the National Invitational Tournament, for just the, not necessarily preseason, but the now tournament, And that's pretty cool in general. And all of those, of course, invitational tournaments, I always loved to watch them. And it brings a great time in my life. Of course, just being with family and all of that, it's a joy to have that, and of course, to give thanks and just really think of this time of year almost, and which is very, very neat. Anyways, moving on, of course, what do we have in store for Rio Sports Live Network this week? It's interesting to say the most. There's not too many things, of course, going on for this weekend, I should say, in Rio Sports Live, and, of course, sports going on in high school. Let's talk a little bit about it here. Well, as it stands, we should be able to have the Sherryland tournament this weekend for girls basketball. Girls basketball, actually, we just have one game on Friday. That's, of course, Brownsville Hannah taking on Brownsville Rivetta. And, of course, that's on Friday, the 28th of November. That tips off at 1:30 p.m. Saturday, November 29th. At the moment, we don't have anything for Friday of the Sherryland tournament. We have for Saturday is boys basketball. They have the Sherryland tournament, as well as, of course, Brownsville Hannah. They'll play their game against Brownsville Lopez. And that will be, once again, one will be tipping off at 12. The other one will be tipping off at 10 a.m. for their first game. That's up in, of course, Sherryland High for that boys basketball tournament. So that should be very interesting. Of course, Friday, I got to interview, of course, one of the players for Sherryland Pioneer. They get to play against Brownsville Hannah this upcoming weekend, of course. If I'm not mistaken, they get to, of course, that's, I think, their start of the tournament, if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty interesting. Got to cover them yesterday. So I guess we'll really start off with the course of basketball and what I was able to see yesterday in general. It was both the boys and the girls basketball teams. Of course, the first game started at 10:30 a.m. That was girls basketball, the varsity game. That one was pretty interesting, to say the least. We got to see why Sherryland Pioneer had some success against San Antonio Clemens. They were able to beat San Antonio Clemens, to be exact, at Border Bash, and they did successful according to kind of their eyes in general, and that's a positive. That's a positive for the it's a positive for the RGV, the way that Pioneer, of course, felt like they did. The same goes, of course, for just a lot of the Valley schools were able to do very well in that tournament, considering how many teams from out of the Valley there were from Laredo schools. Eagle Pass were there, San Antonio Clemens. As I mentioned, San Antonio O'Connor, if I'm not mistaken. 2 New Braunfels were even there, which was pretty interesting. Rio Grande City were able to defeat them on day number 1. It was all bracket play, which was pretty interesting, to say the least. And just kind of, getting to grips with all of that. And the final, of course, was not necessarily something that you'd expect to be so amazing. On paper, that matchup had a lot of eyeballs on it. If that final ended up happening, which it did, which was Edinburgh High girls basketball taking on Westaco High girls basketball. Even the third place game before that was PSJ North High School taking on none other than Donna High School. And so from the Bravettes to the Raiders to, of course, the other final of the Panthers and the Bobcats, you wouldn't have expected for those games to go the way that they did. A dominant performance by PSJ North in that third place game in Border Bash. The dominant performance from Westaco High School in their game against Edinburgh High. Let me tell you something, they're a legit threat this season. I didn't necessarily expect it or really think that they would be that one. I expected them to struggle in that Border Bash tournament, and boy, was I wrong. And I love to be wrong in those, the thought processes and saying, oh, well, I've covered, of course, McCallum Memorial. I've covered these teams, and I've seen them play, and they look really good. There's no way that there's another team that can be that good, considering the strength of schedule just in general and how I see that. And then watching Westaco High destroy Edinburgh High by as many points as they did, where they, I believe, scored close to, if not close, they scored 80 points in that game, in the final. Oh, that says a lot. That says a lot about how good this team actually is. heading into the season, as this girls basketball in general didn't get to see PSJ or didn't get to see the Pioneer Lady Diamondbacks play in that tournament, only when they played this past Tuesday, yesterday, early in the morning, or not necessarily early in the morning, but early, kind of mid-morning to be exact, almost, of course, noonish, sort of. And why I bring that game up is because, well, Pioneer Lady Diamondbacks, of course, they were playing against a team that it's Edinburgh North High School. You don't know what you're going to get from that basketball team on the girls' basketball side of things half the time, and so it was interesting to see. Pioneer Lady Diamondbacks, they still have a lot to work on, that's for sure, but they were able to really get to grips with it, calm things down, and played very well in general. And so I was very impressed with that game and I look forward to covering that team a lot more, just due to the fact of I think that they will do well in that District 31-5A. It's not the easiest one. I think the Nikki Rowe Lady Warriors will be all right. McAllen Memorial seemed like a legit threat for that district. I don't know about Edinburgh Vela. I have not gotten to cover them just yet this season, but I expect for them to do pretty well too. So there's going to be a lot of teams that will be fighting for those 4 spots again. Even Mac High, the Lady Bulldogs don't look too bad this season. They could potentially slip into that 4th spot in general. Now, of course, 32-5A, the teams that they would play against in the White District round right now, those are still up for grabs in general. It's so early, of course, you can't really tell who's going to play who or who's really going to be that legit threat in 32-5A, at least in my eyes, maybe Harlingen South. But that's just, of course, what I have gotten early on for this season. That's, of course, on the girls' basketball side of things. Now, for the boys' basketball side, this was impressive in my eyes, was none other than Sharyland Pioneer in boys' basketball. They played against none other than Rio Hondo High School, and were able to not necessarily dominate the performance against Rio Hondo, because they did have a little bit of a slip-up early on in the second quarter, but the way that this team figured out how, or not figured out how, but really just they found their momentum, they found their groove, really worked out well with, of course, Mohammed Shah scoring 27 points. He was our player of the game yesterday, and it was a very good all-around team victory. The biggest thing that I would say that they would have to really work on right now, the Diamondbacks would have to work on right now, is the turnovers. They just turn the ball over a little bit too much in my eyes to see how this team could potentially just be better on that end, and it's understandable. It's early season game. It's early season woes. It's growing pains. Of course, this team has brought a lot of players back, and they seem like they're a better team for it. And there is going to be a lot of success for this team. I definitely see them up there in the top 3 fighting for the district with the Mac High Bulldogs. I don't expect Nikki Rowe to be up there that much this season on the boys' side. I don't think that they'd make that deep of a run as well, because if I'm not mistaken, for the Rowe Warriors, they did lose a good amount of players, and so that brings up a younger team. I think they'll be very good in the next year or so. We've seen that happen before. As for DeAndre, Canada's back with the Mac High Bulldogs, and so that district is only going, of course, up and up and up in my eyes. And, of course, that 32-5A district is going to be even, not necessarily even more tricky, but it's going to be still a challenge for this 31-5A to get all 4 schools into that area round in general. That area round is now already proven that it's going to be a little tougher, not necessarily because of the football side of things, but just we've seen it before where there's definitely a lot more teams that will want to eliminate teams. Of course, like, for example, the Mission Eagles, Mission Veterans Memorial High School, I don't think will be that good. But, again, Rio Grande City boys basketball are always a solid team on that end. La Jolla, what is Lincoln, I believe? If not, it's Palmview. One of the 2 La Jolla schools on that side are always a very big threat when it comes to 35A. So if those schools are able to eliminate teams from Corpus early on, and of course in the playoffs in that first round, are we looking for an interesting area round in general? And that's just, of course, my early season, almost too early season, not necessarily predictions, but just my thoughts of course, there's still so much basketball to be played. I love it. And as you all can tell, that's like, it's funny. Because, of course, Texas, we roll over with high school football. It's just the life and blood. High school, college, depending on, of course, where people live. But when it comes to basketball, when it comes to that soccer, it sparks something in me where I'm more excited for that side of the season. I couldn't tell you why. But it's so much fun, of course, to be able to cover both of those sports. And even though, yes, I got to cover, of course, high school football. So with that, of course, being said, we'll take a quick break. We will move on to talking about, of course, high school football and how, of course, all those ended and the unfortunate side of how high school football can be. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned.
Auto Body Repair Program is the place to start. Classes are filling fast, so visit tsc.edu and apply today.
Hello, sports fans. I'm Jason Starkey with Gallery Homes.
Here at Gallery, we make building your new home simple and stress-free. From sales to selections, we handle every step so you can enjoy the journey to your new home. This is Gallery, where your dreams become reality.
Back we go once again to hear from Luke Fruia Motors. A little bit of an early, of course, commercial break, but we're back pretty quickly after it because, once again, I'm Jacob Young. This is Rio Sports Live Network. I want to cover so much this hour. It's going to be a packed show because of it. We go back, of course, like I mentioned, I talk a little bit about, of course, how all these teams in the UIL ended up for the Valley ended up for football unfortunately being eliminated in the playoffs in the second round. The second round crutch this year because, I mean, you're talking about, even for this, Corpus Christi Veterans Memorial put in the same district as PSJ North, Flower Bluff, Harlingen South. The teams, of course, the list goes on, is what I'm trying to say. And their second round meetup was going to be against the San Antonio school, like either New Braunfels or whoever, of course, though. This season, they ended up being Corpus Christi Veterans Memorial ended up having to play Smithson Valley. How did that game go? Smithson Valley took care of business 34-0. They're defending state champs. I mean, what else is there to really say if not necessarily defending state champs? Point is, they are a state football team. They expect to get to the state semis at least. And even then, if they get eliminated there, that might be a very upsetting season for this team. Because they almost expect to get to the championship. They almost expect to get to Arlington almost every single year, which is pretty crazy. Of course, well, a little thing that I heard was that there might not be in Arlington next year. It might not, or it might be to the Alamo Dome, which I wouldn't be too shocked about for the state title. But that's kind of course, just those were the news for a while as the contract will expire with Arlington, and we'll see if they decide to renew or it will go to the Alamo Dome, which I believe seats over 50,000. Anyways, it's a lot less than what it seats right now at Dallas Cowboys football stadium. Anyways, that was, of course, that game. Then, of course, you have San Antonio Piper playing against Flower Bluff. Piper beats Flower Bluff 42-35. It was a close game. These are the games where it was pretty interesting. Of course, the Division One side of things, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, exactly. The 2025 Football Conference 581. And so we're going back down to it. PSJ San Juan Alamo North. So PSJ North. Playing against Bernie Champion. This was an interesting game. I was over at Buccaneer Stadium covering McCallum Memorial and New Braunfels. And the McCallum Memorial and New Braunfels game was pretty interesting, to say the least, because McCallum Memorial, they came out striking. They had a long drive for McCallum Memorial and the Mustangs, and then all of a sudden went for it on fourth down, incomplete pass. That was a key first drive, where I think it really set the tone for New Braunfels to take advantage and score 63 points against McCallum Memorial's 29. You go into, of course, PSJ North and Bernie Champion. Now, while I'm there, there's some controversial calls that ended up happening where one was not an incomplete pass. It ended up being a fumble recovered for a touchdown, and other things that ended up happening in that game. PSJ North ended up losing 24-21. It was a very close game, a very closely fought game. And things, of course, of that game, close to the end of it, could have gone PSJ North's way. PSJ North, I believe, ended up fumbling it close to their own side in the lead. They had the lead for the most part of the game. That's the crazy part about all of this. And ended up losing by 3. So, really, like I mentioned, those were two major teams that were eliminated in the playoffs on that Friday. There were still two other games, on that Saturday. There were games played on the Thursday that ended up being 6A. Point is, most of them, check that, not most, all of them are eliminated from Brownsville St. Joseph Academy as well. That's on the TAP side, to Los Fresnos losing to Laredo United just. And there were some things, of course, and even on that game, some people can say, well, Los Fresnos, they should have won that game, but a touchdown gets called back at halftime for a block in the back from an interception. And people want to say that it was not. I've looked at that replay multiple times. I've seen a push in the back. That's going to be a block in the back called 9 times out of 10. And sure enough, it was called. That's just, of course, my take on a lot of those games and the way that it ended up happening. The RGV, all of them are eliminated as expected. It was going to be a very tall task, a very tough ask for any team to move on. There were chances for a lot of them. For example, for Mission Veterans Memorial High School, which was pretty interesting. I talked about it last week with Joe Pulling and how there was a chance that all of them had a chance to move on. And Mission Vets ended up losing to Victoria West 58-14, which was interesting. And a lot of people, and I guess including myself even, really were saying, well, check that. I remember actually saying this past week that if Mission Vets don't take advantage of some opportunities, they're going to fall behind quickly. And I didn't think that they could make an interesting game if it got into a bit of a shootout. And boy, was I right. Mission Veterans Memorial in the first quarter, don't score in the first quarter. And it's 14 points to Victoria West High School up by 2 scores. Then they score 17 points in the second quarter, where Mission Vets only score 14. That's about on average for Mission Veterans Memorial. And being shut out in the second half is what, of course, killed their drive, killed their opportunities to get back into this one. It's the truth. And it's unfortunate for them. It really is unfortunate for Mission Veterans Memorial High School. They felt like they had a really strong chance to move on, and that was not the case. Wesco High School ended up getting eliminated. Basically, all teams do in a very difficult way, in very difficult fashion, is what I'm trying to say. That just happens, and it's unfortunate. There's not much else to really talk about on this because of the situation of how it all just ended for Valley football this year. But like I mentioned and like I was talking about, there's so much positive still left this year of this sports year. There is some truth to the saying of we should be able to have a state champion in basketball on the girls' basketball side. It will be on the TAPS end, but I believe they could do it, which will be Harvest Christian Academy. Then you can also look at other teams that can make a serious run even into UIL to get to that regional semis and finals. And this is on the boys' basketball side of things. I still think Edinburgh-Villa are that strong. McAllen High, I think, can be that strong as well. If they stay healthy, all these players, all these teams stay healthy, they can make a run, definitely, if the bracket really favors them too. Again, this is so early talk, but my whole point is there's so much to still look forward to in the Valley for sports that in general, support. I know that people live and breathe football in Texas, but support the basketball program, support the soccer programs this season because, again, we're talking about teams on both ends that can make a run potentially for state, even on girls soccer, even on the girls soccer side of things too. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. And there's a lot, of course, to go with it. It's almost 2:30 p.m., which means we will move on to none other than talking about some college football and a little bit of college sports talk when we return. Of course, yes, we'll touch up on UTRGV and how their season ended up finishing, and we'll talk about why their season is done now. And then, of course, like I mentioned, we'll get to college football more on the topic. We'll talk about the playoff picture at the moment because that's always a fun one to really discuss, and I've got so much to say on that because it's happy rivalry week in college football too. That's what always this final regular season week means, and then the following week is conference championships. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, and then you even have the Sun Belt Championships, the AC Conference, which is the American. It used to be called the American Athletic Conference. I think it's just called the Athletic Conference now. And then, of course, it moves on to just other conferences as well that are smaller. Stay tuned. We'll talk a lot about that when we return.
Time to take a new look, maybe your first look at Buick. If smart, hip, and affordable is for you, Buick's your brand. Fruia Buick, Brownsville, Texas.
Permatemp Personnel Services has been servicing local businesses for the past 29 years.
Leave the hiring to us. Let us become your personal hiring guru. We have a network of skilled employees to fit your needs.
Your success is our strategy.
Don't hesitate, call us now.
No matter where you are in life, Texas Southmost College is here to help you move forward. Whether you're starting fresh, changing careers, or gaining new skills, TSC has affordable programs designed to fit your goals. It's time to take the next step. Think big. Think bright. Think TSC.
Back we go once again to hear from Luke Fruia Motors. Luke Fruia Buick GMC and Cadillac. I'm Jacob Young. This is Rio Sports Live Network. It's been a fun little show to, of course, talk a lot about some high school sports for you all. Now, of course, jumping to college sports. We'll start off with UTRGV football and how their season ended up finishing up. And why will I bring this up? Well, because there's some things to talk about for UTRGV, of course, for their football season. Let's talk about this. Just for the start, I will admit, I was wrong on this. This season for them, with the probation in mind, this was a successful year in the regular season. We start off, of course, with game number 1 of the year, where UTRGV could really only play against a lot of Division III and Division II schools. From the start of playing Sul Ross, they beat them 66-0. Then UTRGV plays Prairie View A&M for their first ever road game. And this was a crazy victory in general, beating an SWC team, as well as an HBCU team. They go on the road. The Vaqueros go on the road and win 27-21 over Prairie View A&M. A very impressive victory, to say the least. Then they play against Langston, a team that I, of course, had never heard of because they're Division II to Division III. They win 80-0, scoring, of course, the most points they had ever scored, and it happened to be at home. Then against Texas Wesleyan, they win 61-13. Then, of course, starting conference play, they play against Southeastern Louisiana. This was their first real test. They lose 45-31 your score. This is where things were interesting. And again, you want to highlight this game right now, is Southeastern Louisiana beating them 45-31. And then Houston Christian traveling to UTRGV, and UTRGV winning 27-7. An easy victory there once again, right back at home. Playing against Lamar, they lose by 2 against Lamar, 23-21, where they were down most of the game in general. And so UTRGV, they showed some fight right there. But only losing, and again on the road, only losing by 2, there were some positives in that game in general. This is the thing that this is also a little bit of a side rant, real quick. This is the thing that I hate. When fans say, a win is a win. Because in college, it's not. In college, it is not just a win is a win. Because, yes, you can learn a lot more from the losses, and they win it by 2. Or Lamar wins by 2, but UTRGV, you learned a lot from that team off of that game in general, losing by 2. And then against UIW, destroying them 56-28. Very impressive for that victory. Then at Stephen F. Austin, in Nacogdoches, Texas, they lose 41-17. That was a red flag right there for UTRGV football, and just okay, what happened there? Is Stephen F. Austin that much of a team? Yes, they are. Then playing against Nichols at home, they win 28-21 by a touchdown. Then playing at McNeese State, they win 28-13. Playing East Texas A&M University at home to finish off their season 33-14. Here's where things were interesting. We go all the way to where we kind of talk about it. And I'm trying to bring up the standings here. UTRGV in the FCS, in the Southland Conference, finish in 4th. The 3 teams that were ahead of them in the conference, they all lost it. Stephen F. Austin win the Southland. Southeastern Louisiana finished 2nd. Lamar finished 3rd. UTRGV finished 4th. UTRGV were on probation, but then for a split second there was an outside chance that they could go up to a committee and say, hey, look, this is how good this team has been. Would you lift that probation for the first year? And all of a sudden, can UTRGV make the playoffs in the FCS? That didn't end up happening because the FCS playoffs are as followed for 2025. The official bracket is as followed, with, of course, the byes and all. Illinois State, Southeastern Louisiana. Central Connecticut State, Rhode Island. Harvard, Villanova. North Dakota, Tennessee Tech. Then your byes are Tarleton State. Lehigh to be exact. UC Davis. North Dakota State as well. Here's on the other side, you have Montana State. You have Stephen F. Austin. Yale, Youngstown State, Lamar University, Abilene Christian. Mercer, Drake, South Dakota, and Montana, as well as New Hampshire and South Dakota State. Those are your teams that have made it to the FCS tournament, the FCS playoffs. Now, again, let's say, for example, we lift up, the NCAA did lift up the probation for UTRGV this season. Still finishing 4th in that conference, I just don't believe that the committee would have looked at them and said, yes, this is the at-large bid that we want to put into the tournament, that we want to put into the playoffs. I just don't believe that because, then again, I look at Harvard and their schedule, and I got to follow them this season, as well as Yale, and I say those Ivy League teams played technically a tougher schedule in my eyes. And they did. Now, next year, I completely will see UTRGV having the perfect shot of making it because there's this outside chance that UTRGV are already good enough to beat UTSA. I'm saying it now, yes. For a person who did not think that this team was going to succeed for a while, if those players come back and the transfer portal, of course, opens up on January, oh boy, will you see, in my eyes, a good amount of players go to basically what I'm saying is we will know exactly how good this team is for the next year in general. Because of the teams because of the players, it's going to be that situation. Okay. Anyways, should be exciting. My point is, with the transfer portal, there's going to be some players that didn't feel like they got loved or felt like, of course, their job is at risk for that next season. And so all of a sudden, you're going to put this, you're going to have players that will be free and will be potentially looking at UTRGV as a spot, depending on the NIL and all that. You look at, of course, some other teams or players that have had that success from the SEC as well, who ended up jumping ship from even A&M for a season and then going to UIW. Then from there, they go back to the other side. And so it's just a lot of that type of situation. But that's, of course, just one of the situations. Now moving on to the bigger picture in general, and this is the big one, the FBS with the college football playoffs, the penultimate rankings of the regular season, I should say, have officially come out this Tuesday from the committee, and that's not too shocking in general. Let's look at them together. We all know, of course, with the CFP bracket rankings at the moment, the top three have not changed in the slightest. It's still Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M for the top three. And even fourth hasn't changed yet. And this is the truth. For the top four, it's Georgia as number 4, to be exact. Fifth at the moment. And, of course, this is a 12-team playoff. So, 5th is Texas Tech. 6th is Oregon. 7th is Ole Miss. 8th is Oklahoma. Those are all teams that would be hosting a first-round playoff game, by the way. 9th is Notre Dame. 10th is Alabama. 11th is Miami. And 12th is Tulane. So that's your top 12. That's the truth. So it's an interesting top 12 because, again, there's no real arguments of who should be in at the moment and who shouldn't. There's going to be a lot of change that's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. Now, we don't expect for Ohio State to lose this weekend, but there's been a very difficult thing for themselves, and that's the biggest thing of Ohio State cannot beat Michigan. They have not been able to beat Michigan for a while. And that's a big answer, or that's a big thing in general. So you look back at it, and that's, of course, just the truth. For a lot of teams right now, even for the SEC to be exact, Ole Miss still has an outside chance of making the SEC championship. Alabama still does as well as Texas A&M and Georgia. It's really interesting for Texas A&M. They need to win against none other than Texas in order to, well, they have a spot clinched in the SEC. Not necessarily in the SEC championship game, but they have a spot clinched in the playoffs. It's just a matter of where. And the big thing is beating Texas. I think if Texas A&M can do that, they would fall no further, or they would end up falling if they lost the SEC championship game no further than a top 4 spot in my eyes. That's just, of course, how even the committee kind of favors the SEC in that realm. And just, again, you're looking at a one-loss Texas A&M football team when there are still 2 lost football teams that may play for a national or may play for a conference championship like the ACC. With getting an ACC champion, that's almost a guarantee that that an ACC team will make it to the playoffs in general, most likely eliminating Tulane. There's a good chance of that happening. And even Tulane, that's from the athletic conference. So there's a lot of variables still with the playoffs, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that all plays out in a week from now. Of course, as the rivalry games all will finish up, and then, of course, the SEC championship, the ACC championship, the Big Ten championship, Big 12 championship will really decide a lot of things. If Texas end up losing, or Texas Tech end up losing, that's going to be a shock. That's going to throw a wrench in even more. Right now, the teams on the outside looking in are the Utah schools, BYU, and the Utah Utes. So the Cougars and the Utes looking on the outside looking in, and again, the Cougars of BYU, Brigham Young University. So there's that level of interest in general in this final week of play. And I don't know how it's all going to play out. All we know is that Ohio State should defeat Michigan in Ann Arbor, but we don't know. Michigan are as good as they normally have been. But that's been Ohio State's kryptonite. That's been their Achilles heel. I don't know why they can't beat them, but they haven't been able to. So if Ohio State end up losing to Michigan, that shakes everything up even more, as in Ohio State's not going to be the number 1 team, even if they win the Big Ten championship. Because if they do, all of a sudden, then that takes a loss into account for Indiana. Indiana with a loss, Ohio State with a loss, all of a sudden. And on the outside, if this happens where Texas A&M do defeat Texas and do defeat, let's say, Georgia in the championship game, then all of a sudden, Texas A&M, they're 1 seed. They're the 1 seed. Not a 1 seed, they're the 1 seed. That is on an outside chance that can happen. Probably will not. But you look at it that way and say, I don't believe Indiana has a chance against Ohio State. I could be wrong. And Indiana could end up beating Ohio State in that championship game and still be undefeated too. So there's a lot of things. And if Ohio State somehow, some way lose back-to-back games, that's going to be something to really talk about and say, look, the Big Ten did not have the schedule that everyone thought that they did. And while everyone was complaining about Texas A&M finally having the easiest schedule possible, look at Ohio State. They didn't play anyone. That's going to be, of course, the talk of the town again in college football. It happens so much. But this is a blast to really talk about it and break it down. I love to do this in March, and I love to do this now because of this 12-team playoff. Just makes so much more sense to where you're trying to get the 12 best teams in. And there's a good chance that you will. I don't expect Tulane or any of those teams to, because it's really difficult when you put a 5-star, or not a 5-star, but a non-Power 5 school into the 12-team playoffs. Because we also saw it last year. In the first year of the playoffs, SMU were not great. Penn State struggled very much. Clemson had a rough time. Of course, that was more ACC than anything, but the committee are definitely trying to make sure that they're more careful on who they select to get into the tournament, because they don't want first-round duds to be the case. They want those games to still be competitive. There was, of course, Notre Dame making it to the championship. Notre Dame, that's a very dangerous two-loss team. I don't expect them to be any better after this weekend with a victory than maybe 9th or 8th. Of course, they will still be hosting a playoff game in my eyes, too. But I don't expect them to get a bye or anything like that because of 2 losses. So after these next 2 weekends, we will have 1-loss teams that will be in the top 4. I can guarantee you that. Whether that's Indiana, whether that's Ohio State. That could be both of them. Whether, of course, that's also Texas A&M too with it, because Georgia already has about, if I'm not mistaken, 2 losses. And so does Alabama. And so it really shakes up the whole entire 12-team playoff. So we look forward to all of that and just how this weekend's going to go. And it all starts, of course, Thanksgiving, of course, is a little bit of a break for college football. And then Friday, oh my goodness, Friday with Texas A&M, Texas, and Saturday with the rest of the games going on. That cannot be any more exciting this weekend. It's one of the reasons why I love Thanksgiving week, as well as, of course, for college basketball on just about 24/7. It's so cool. So, anyways, Jake Young, this is Rio Sports Live Network. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned.
Endless activities for all ages. Then dance the night away with live music. Savor fresh seafood and discover unique food trucks and shop our charming boutiques. What are you waiting for? Escape the everyday at South Padre Island.
At Tortilleria Ibañez, flavor starts fresh every day. Crispy flautas, homemade tamales, and our signature chicken salad, all made for you. Tortilleria Ibañez, tradition on every plate.
Kitty. Back live, we go once again to hear from Luke Fruia Motors. Just closing out this show. It's 6 more minutes until, of course, 3 p.m., which we end, of course, here at 3 p.m. And there's not much else really to talk about, of course, for this weekend. As, of course, it is Thanksgiving weekend once again. I guess we can go one more time back into talking a little more about college sports, and that is, of course, for UTRGV and basketball. How has this been for UTRGV basketball this season? It's been on and off for this team. UTRGV basketball, to be exact, have kept it close with a couple of teams. They lost on Monday to the Fighting Illini. UTRGV did against the number 13 Illinois, fighting Illini 87-73. It was at Illinois, to be exact. And they played against Missouri State not too long ago. That was on Saturday at Missouri State. They lost 74-67. And then against Southwest Adventist, never had I ever heard of that school. They won 110-53. And you can move on, of course, with, the games that they played against. They played against Boise State. They lost by 20, 85-65. They played against Southern Utah. They won 95-72. And then against Baylor, losing 96-81. That was on November 3rd to open up the season. So for UTRGV, yes, there have been some positives on this season so far, but the biggest question is, how is their defense? Because if they're giving up 72 points against Southern Utah, but scoring 95 points, there is a positive there. And then, of course, giving up 85 points against Boise State. This team kind of did that last year, where UTRGV basketball for a split second, they played against, of course, Southeastern Louisiana, or SLU to be exact. They won 77-76. That was their final game on March 3rd. They won 88-78 against New Orleans, but then they could not beat the teams like McNeese State, where McNeese State beat them 100-65. And so there were a lot of those games where they were very questionable for that whole entire season, where UTRGV, they had so much success, and then all of a sudden just could not get kind of with the program in a way, losing against Houston Christian 66-57 and beating East Texas A&M 57-55, losing to Texas A&M Corpus Christi 79-74, and the list goes on. But like I said, they did play against Southern Utah. They won 78-73, and playing against, Lamar Early and all those fun things, it really said a lot. They lost 87-84 against Wisconsin last year on November 18th. So I just go back to it, and why I do so much is because these early games do, for some smaller schools, they do set the precedent of what to expect for their season. But, of course, that's just how I see things in general. And for, I can't even talk about Texas A&M. Maybe last night in college basketball, Missouri Valley State, if I'm not mistaken, 120 to, I believe, 78 or something like that. They let them score around that much. And it was great to see Texas A&M scoring that many points, but again, it's against a cupcake opponent. We'll learn a lot more of this, of course, Friday from Texas A&M. They play against Florida State University, and it's a lot of those types of games and where you get to see how those teams will face off. Texas A&M lost against UCF earlier this season for the second time in a row, as in last year they lost against UCF on the road, and at home this time they lose against them. So it's a lot of, okay, they're losing to these schools. They're losing to the bigger schools, but beating the smaller schools by that much. So I think it's going to be the best thing to say is it's going to be an interesting season, to say the least. That's it. I don't expect anything to be absolutely just insane, but I don't expect to see anything that's terrible either from Texas A&M, from UTRGV as well. I think they're going to have a solid season if they can at least make it to the Southland Conference playoffs, tournament. That's a success in my book. To have a chance as a mid-major, to fight for a spot, that's what a program like that want and need. It just has not felt the same since they really had those opportunities in 2000 and really 15, 14, 13, when they had a long-time head coach there for a while in the Big East or something like that. Not the Big East, but the Big West. Some conference like that. But that's just me. Anyways, we have officially hit 3 p.m., So, I've been Jacob Young. This has been a Rio Sports Live presentation. Thank you all so very much for watching and just listening, of course, to this. It's a little bit more of a slow